can hear myself beautifully.
Yeah,
I
the
sound
beginning
great.
phrase is yes.
Mine's a little, yeah.
I
think
love,
so.
I
It's
love
a
my
little low,
voice.
but I
Thursday.
can hear myself in my head.
It's wonderful.
It'll be fine. Yes.
It's absolutely beautiful. You can come in. Please don't let this preclude you from,
Yeah, please.
from coming to the
Do
feedback.
what you must.
Good.
Yes, sir.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Discourse Series event, our second of the year. Let's get a round of applause to kick this off so that it looks good for the recording. This is the first time we've ever done a Discourse Series event at a public venue like this, so I'm really excited. I'll probably be doing more of my radio voice, where I'm trying to sound a lot more cool and professional instead of my manic teaching voice while we're doing this in a classroom. I obviously the very first thing that we need to get out of the way is to have a huge round of applause and thank you to Espresso Art Cafe for hosting us. For those of you who are watching live or watching the recording, go to Espresso Art on University. It's the absolute best place in the world. You can get a hookah or a coffee or a drink in the back. There is just no better place. And they are wonderful supporters of the arts, which is why we're doing this here. We're right next to Posner's Art Shop, and also, of course, it's called Espresso Art Cafe. Because they want to make sure that we are supporting local artists, that we're supporting the concept of the arts, and that is kind of what our discussion tonight is about. Our umbrella theme in the Discourse Series this year is the unknown future, and so we're always looking at the future of a different topic for every one of our events. And tonight's event is going to be the future of art and creativity. We're going to try to figure out what the future of this possibly threatened field is looking like in all its different iterations. We're going to be talking, hopefully, about 3 different versions of that. We're going to talk about the threat that AI poses to art, or maybe the good things that AI might do for art. We're going to talk about the arts in education, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the arts in professional fields and what is it the industries look like. We'll happily take questions from our audience in the second half, but first I want to make sure that we get to our panel. Tonight we have 2 faculty members and 2 student creatives, 2 student artists with us. So why don't we just go ahead and go down the panel. I'm Ted. If you're watching this, I assume you already know what the Discourse Series is, and therefore you know who I am. I'm the executive director of the Discourse Series, and I also teach fiction at the University of Arizona, which is why it is that I am qualified to be on this panel. Kendall, why don't we start with you?
Hi everybody, I'm Kendall Gray, and I also teach fiction. I teach freshman composition as well at the U of A. And I'm a writer too. I like to write fiction and poetry.
Oh, I probably shouldn't. I'm also a writer.
Yeah, Ted's definitely a writer.
Yeah. Empty Calories and Mad Curiosities. Pre-order available now. You should go get it. Yeah, please, Kendrick.
Hi y'all, I'm Kendrick. I'm a theater maker first and foremost. I've been doing theater forever. I love doing the acting side of things as well as the dramatic structure of things and storytelling overall, so I'm really into the arts.
Just to fill out the writer trifecta, I'm Winter. I'm a creative writing major at the U of A. I'm also a game dev minor, and I work here at the UA Discourse Series run by Ted. And me and Kendrick actually host a podcast for it called Creative Cats that talks to various artists from across campus about their projects and about what they're working on and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get started and talk about this. When we look at, let's start with since we're talking about already our roles as students and as teachers, the arts in the classroom. How do we feel as though that is going right now? Do we feel there's a sort of looming threat? Whenever you're in the classrooms, do you feel like you're sort of more and more sort of isolated and alone? Or do you feel that there are a lot of creatives across campus? And I'm going to start with the students here. I mean, do you feel like the creative life of students is vibrant and really thriving? Do you feel like there's a real creative community, or do you feel like that's something that is kind of at threat and needs to be more established and supported?
Just within the English department, the creative writing field for me, it's definitely different as far as when I talk to professors like you or Manuel Munoz or others in the department, that there is a change that's happened since COVID, that it's a bit less personal between students and teachers, that it's a bit more focused on like just kind of teaching the students, and the students all go home eventually because everyone got so used to just doing their classes from their computer, so why talk to anyone?
Right.
And I think that's coming back. Like, the UA Discourse Series is one thing, Persona, which is a literary magazine on campus, is another. But I think it's different than I was expecting thinking about college when I was first like signing like 5 years ago now. But you know.
Well, but that's interesting because writing is, I think, we can all agree, is almost by definition a very solitary act. And those workshops are kind of one of the few places where we do find that kind of like group kind of activity and community. But theater's not. So what do we see like in the theater world? Do we see that like undergrads are like really kind of like getting face to face and being able to socialize and really getting that kind of sense of community?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, theater inherently is a very collaborative like art form. So definitely like a lot of theater students are working together and learning how to collaboratively develop these shows that they are like dreaming of as they're working on it. I will say the theater program is in like a changing phase right now, and it has been kind of for the past 5-ish years, at least since I've been a part of the program. So definitely there's some kind of level of like trying to engage the younger students to like be able to like take charge of their own education and create their own opportunities. But the students that are creating their own opportunities are not only creating opportunities for themselves, but they're creating opportunities for other students to be able to build these projects from the ground up. So it's a little bit hard to get your foot in the door, but once you do, there's like a whole world of creativity and collaboration.
What does it look like practically when you say like that the students are trying to create opportunities for each other? Like give me an example of what that kind of looks like.
So there's quite a few students that are writers as well, and so they're like pitching ideas for plays and like trying to figure out how to effectively and logically write a play, get like a staged reading out there in the world, which the Tornabean Theater is like free to rent the space as long as there's like a faculty member that's also in the room. So it's very easy to like get your foot in that door specifically for like stage readings and stuff, and they will offer like, please help stage manage this stage reading.
Sure.
Please help be a part of this stage reading. Everyone please come to these stage readings.
Yeah.
And there's also like a sketch comedy club that is just starting, so like there are people that are wanting to create clubs and create little communities within the theater program to be able to like hone their skills a little bit more.
I've noticed, Winter, you mentioned COVID before. I've noticed now that we're, 4 years or so out of the pandemic, I've noticed that students have gone from like having a hard time figuring out how to socialize and be back on campus to very much taking the initiative you're talking about. Like I see so many students who are trying to create those clubs and are really, really, really hungry for that kind of sense of community. Kim, let me throw it to you, just in terms of like the evolution of what you've seen from when you were an undergrad, when you're in grad school, teaching, just as recently as like 10 years ago, and now, do you feel as though there's sort of like been a shift in just the general kind of like vibe of a workshop, and what does the students want, what it is the students are turning in, all that kind of stuff?
I think to
It's a broad question.
No, it's good. That's great. And thanks for having me, Ted, by the way. I'm happy to be here. I think to echo what you said, Ted, definitely right after COVID, there was like a little bit more of a this like adjustment period that was a little tougher, especially in creative writing workshops, where it did feel sometimes that like creating a community in the classroom, getting people comfortable with each other was a lot harder. But I also agree that after a couple of years, maybe in 2021, 2022, I started to notice that students like were desperate to have those spaces where they could connect and like share their work and be really human with each other in person. And they didn't want to do things online at all. And like they didn't want to do Zoom meetings like for conferences, right? They wanted to be in person. So that, and I'm still seeing that, I think, that a lot of students want the human connection.
But so it's interesting you say the word online, because I also outside of course online classes, I think we can all agree that, especially in the arts, being in a remote space is kind of antithetical to what the whole entire point of it is. But you mentioned online, and I remember about a year ago I was talking to a student who was telling me about how vibrant the online, not educational space, but just like the online arts community, like finding people in like Discord channels, or just like finding communities of people, like pockets of people who really like your stuff and just want to sort of like, you know, like collaboratively like read other people's stuff. Do students now, is that something that you can find a symbiosis of like where it is you can find those online communities and also have those in-person things? Like where does that online stuff start, like in terms of actually finding other creatives out there?
I think online stuff, it heavily depends on the person, because obviously there's so many like different social media platforms that people can use and often do, and they all have their own different cultures about it, and the way that they function changes it entirely. But I'd say like if someone uses the internet regularly, they're pretty easily going to find someone to like associate with. Like just in writing, the amount of kids in like our department that like got their start just by writing fan fictions on like AO3 or whatever. And then it's evolved into like doing it more professionally and wanting to get into it fully. And I think that there's occasionally a struggle to like cross over from one to the other that at least I've seen, where it's like if someone is more used to like in-person like creative writing workshops and stuff like that, and it's harder to get online because you don't know, at least for me, how to like get my foot in the door the first time a lot. And then similarly for in person, I feel like if it's not something that's reached out to you, which is why like teachers have been so helpful, because when they're like, you should do this thing, and I'm like, obviously I'm gonna do it now.
Sure.
But without an invitation, I've always been like, oh, I feel like I should stay out, or it's not my place, or I'm worried about how it's gonna go, or whatever.
That makes sense. And the theater community as well? I mean, is that something, is there even like an online space for the theater community?
I definitely think there is like an online space for the theater community. I think most of it is like, hey, here's this project that I'm working on. Hey, here's this thing that I have done recently. Here's this thing that I would like to develop if anyone is like interested in helping. But definitely, I mean, for me personally, I'm not very much like social media connection type person. I'm on social media a lot, but networking in general is a little bit difficult for me, especially online. I much prefer like face-to-face connection, because that a lot of the time, especially in theater, because you need to be considered as like a reliable collaborator, being able to make those human connections is so crucial in order to like build your own opportunities.
So it almost sounds like it's the digital space of theater is sort of where like casting calls used to be in like newspapers. Like it's more about trying to get people to come and meet in person.
Yeah, it's absolutely, I would say the online space is definitely like a stepping stone into personal collaboration, but also there's a lot of people who are like conversing online to like for very long periods of time. Like we see this in like music, where people are like digitally producing these full albums from like separate spaces, from separate places in the world. So like it can very much be a thing that happens online throughout the construction process, but theater is definitely a thing that happens person to person live.
I want to comment on that before I do. Since you mentioned social media, I thought of this. Aylin's not here, so Abby, could you take some pictures of the audience? I feel like, again, like one of the online communities that we see in the writing community especially is if you happen to be interested in blah 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 genre, right? And it feels like a very niche thing, and theater as well. It's a good space to find people who you wouldn't normally attach yourself to, or you wouldn't normally find in the real world. So good. I mean, I feel like I can chart like what it is that my creative writing students were really into in like 2010, and then in 2015, and everybody in 2010 was writing vampire stuff, because like Twilight was everywhere. It was like the biggest thing ever. And then like there was like a really big sort of boom in like sci-fi fantasy stuff as as like the Marvel universe sort of started to come out. I keep on naming sort of like movies, but I do feel like that's been a big influence. So where do you feel like you're getting, like what's the genre du jour do you feel like getting a lot from students right now? Like what do you think, what are they really into?
Oh man, that's a hard question. Now,
Yeah.
I mean, there was, not now, but there were a few years ago we talked about like there was a Harry Potter kind of phase
Sure.
a few years ago. Now, I don't know.
Serial killers were really big for a while.
Yeah, serial killers. I think that's also serial killers.
Sure.
But I will say, maybe my students are more eclectic now because I am not, nothing's like emerging like that I'm seeing a lot of. Serial killers though. still serial killers.
Stalkers too.
Yeah, stalkers.
Yeah,
Which I like a good horror, psychological thriller. So, I guess horror too. I've seen some horror influence because I do feel like horror is pretty big.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing a lot of that, like psychological, body horror, that kind of stuff.
So what's up with that? Why the violence? Why? I feel like you're the best person.
Why am I the best person to ask this question?
Not just the students are violence is there's.
I think at least a little bit of it comes from the fact that I feel like during the period where I was online, there was just a lot more of a prevalence of casual observation of violence, and it became more grappling in a way to kind of see it through a TV screen.
Yeah.
And I think also just at the end of the day, what's going to spice up your romance book? Oh well, a stalker. What's going to spice up your fantasy genre book? Oh well, the Dark Prince is actually super hot but also evil.
Yeah. Smut is very big these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's because I talked a little bit about this on the other podcast, the Discourse Debrief last year. I had mentioned that I do find it fun that the students will write those stories, and they won't give trigger warnings for the crazy violent stuff, but they'll be trigger warning, someone smokes pot on page 10, and I'll be that's what you're gonna that's the trigger you think is gonna be out like that. I think that's. I do feel like there's almost. I mean, is it a desensitization to the violence or is it that it's just pure violence as entertainment? Is that what it is?
I think it's kind of often seen just as part of the genre, if you get what I mean. If you're reading a story about horror or about a serial killer or about a stalker or whatever, then you're going to kind of assume violence is inherent in it. But I don't know, the person writing would be I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble if I happen to smoke a weed.
Right. Well, so the good thing is that when students do this, as you said, they're eclectic, they have their own individual voices, which is my maybe clunky transition into talking about AI, right? Where, because AI is not eclectic, right? AI is just sort of this conglomeration of other people's work that it's just trying to spit out. So let's talk about the way that AI is possibly threatening or maybe possibly helping some of our industries. I'm kind of most interested because I think I'm least familiar with how does the theater program, do people who are in theater feel that same kind of threat right now?
Yeah, absolutely, especially with AI generative writing.
Okay.
Definitely, we are experiencing kind of a fear almost of AI taking over the writing field within theater, especially because theater is such an experimental thing right now. We were talking about how genres can be tracked. Right now, a lot of it is kind of more leaning into collaborative devised theater that is made on your feet, and I feel part of that is because of this low sense of fear of, well, if I'm a writer and AI is happening at the same time, I'm not going to have a job, so I have to do this thing that relies people connecting and being on their feet so that my job is not threatened. Also with theater, show posters, with movie posters, we're seeing a lot of studios and production spaces and venues using posters that are AI generated. And so it's also local to Tucson even. It's also very much a thing of it is threatening the
graphic designers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's threatening the fundamental collaboration, the fundamental value of collaboration that lies within the theater.
Yeah, which sucks. I mean, and that's the thing that I feel like people don't talk about when they talk about AI and AR. It's they'll talk about, you can just prompt the thing to write a script. But you're totally right that it is a communal process, right? It's about trial and error. It's about bouncing ideas off of each other and trying to be able to get to that.
Especially with new play development, I feel when you are creating a new play, it is all about the actor also feels that this character would speak this way. Let's explore that further. Let's play with that impulse.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, which cannot be done with AI.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that the other thing about art is that it's supposed to, like, the best art is supposed to take risks, right? And I do feel like AI is pretty risk-averse when it comes to the arts, right? Like, it kind of just does whatever is sort of, like, safest and crowdsourced and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, about, like, where do we see the actual sort of, like risk-taking, really, like, dangerous, but also necessary version of art being kind of vulgarized by AI? What's the case?
I mean, it's outsourcing the job of artists to like a corporate guy that like got a business degree.
Yeah.
No offense to corporate guys who got a business degree. It's a great degree, I imagine. But I find that like there is something within the corporate world that at the end of the day it needs approval from whoever is the 9 guys above you.
Yeah.
And so an AI model, like you're going to have to make sure that that is not just for like your bosses, but for your shareholders, for whatever is the people investing in your company, for whatever ways that like you have all these things that you have to support. You cannot take a risk on like having this model just go crazy and become like, what was the thing that like Grok said, like Mecha Hitler or something?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we also don't want that to happen in the arts either. But.
Well, exactly. But like, I feel that like it's because you're looking to replace artists who cost money. They're trying to find a cheap way to replace it, and the cheap replacement needs corporate approval, so it can't do the thing artists need to do, which is go out on the limb and try something new.
Yeah. Do you see this in your classes?
I'm starting to. So in my freshman composition classes, for sure. I mean, there's definitely use of AI.
Well,
but in the creative writing classes, this semester, I'm starting to.
Really?
I'm starting to.
What kind? I mean.
It's more so, which just sounds really dramatic, but I mean, I guess it could be. It's more so other students are like suspicious of each other. And they're like, they'll mention to me, like, I think this story may have been, they can kind of see it. And I always just tell my students, like, please don't use AI because it's such a waste of our time for you to get feedback on something you didn't write, like, don't do it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they aren't. So I have to admit, I'm still grappling with, like, how to handle it. So, yeah, I haven't figured it out.
So flip the question, not that I even think that there's really two sides to this, but is there anything good that AI can do, like for artists and with like what can we do to maybe like use this for good instead of for evil? What's that?
Proof of concept.
Proof of concept. Okay, yeah, I like that. Yeah, elaborate.
Yeah, I mean, to reduce the time to market. Like if you tactically, I like you said something about collaborative. It's almost sounded tactical.
Like collaborative play development?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds almost like we only got a week until we can try to elevator pitch kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then flesh it out, by candlelight with a quill pen.
Yeah, I mean, so in other words, not the generative stuff, but the actual like we're trying to get the
quick
sort of
30
million
second.
shit done.
Here's the proof of concept. That's not
Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah, anything else that we think AI can do?
The other half of my degree, like my minor in game dev, well, like I'm not a big positive person on AI within like my creative writing. I find that in game dev it has a lot of actually useful uses because
just for like for the old people in the room.
Game dev is video game development, and in video games often you'll have things called like dialogue trees, where essentially when you're talking with someone, you have a limited amount of ways that you can interact with them. Because you can only program so many lines of code into the game. So a lot of people have been toying around with the idea of instead of having it just be like the pre-written dialogue options, you write up the person's personality and then have some kind of language model that is that person that instead like answers directly whatever the player wants to ask. So instead of just having like 4 dialogue options, 3 of which are yes, 1 of which is no but kind of nice about it, then you could theoretically replace it with anything you want to say directly, and it can respond like seemingly naturally. But that's more of like a way that's useful as a tool rather than like replacing a writer, because you still need someone to write up the like, for lack of a better word, like basic sort of dialogue that this person would say to the player.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I want to highlight, you said like using it as a tool, because that's exactly what I was going to say, is like I feel like the only time that AI is really genuinely useful and can be used for like good within the arts is when it's used as a tool, like proof of concept, like you were saying. Like when it's, I don't think generative AI, I can't personally come up with any idea as to why generative AI would be good in terms of the arts, but AI as like use of tool for like with lighting design, for example, within theater, like lighting design programs are technically AI, and that is a very useful tool that a lot of lighting designers use. Same with set design, like taking the dimensions of a space and creating a set within it on a computer so that you can see what it will look like in real life within, like the Tornavine is such a funky shape, like you have to be able to see it in order to believe it. So like with spaces like that, using AI as a tool, even though it's not generative AI, that could be a good use of the
The only one that I heard, I actually heard one of my students this semester say, sometimes when they're trying to come up with names for characters, they'll go like, "Hey, what are this is a character who is like this. Can you give me a name?" And the only reason why I think of that is useful and helpful. Although I do think it's sometimes good to just sort of like flex that muscle in your brain where you actually are coming up with names on your own. I do think it's sometimes, I know what it's like to be an artist where you're like, I have 6 chapters worth of stuff that I know that I want to write, but until I have the name for the character, I can't do it, and then you just get like stuck on that. Like, I do like the idea of it like getting like writers past that really kind of perfunctory kind of like a pedantic kind of writer's block. So that might be helpful. But I can't really think of anything else that's that. And I also think just go ask a friend. Just go make a friend and then say, "Hey friend, give me an idea for
Pinterest.
Yeah, go on Pinterest, whatever. So let's talk a little bit about just AI and the sort of like the industry of, or not AI, the arts and the industry of the arts. Before we get to some audience questions, just in terms of the future of the arts, whether it be how it is that sort of like we see like where theater is going right now, and now we're sort of divorcing ourselves from AI. We can move past that conversation. Like what the theater industry looks like. What is the we think that the writing and publishing industry looks like? I tell my students all the time that like the writing industry feels like it's very different from when we were, starting out. I'm making it sound like we're 80 years old, but we were only in grad school like 15 years ago. But I mean, like the entire the rise of a lot of these online indie publishers, it really happened in those 15 years, right? Like I feel like before this, it was very much like the Big Five. It was very much, it was very white, very male. It was and we've gotten to a place where there's a lot of demand for more sort of marginalized voices, a lot of niche audiences. And not even just sort of marginalized voices identity-wise, but just in terms of taste, right? Like you can kind of find anything now, and it's getting published in a really kind of great way. So I've seen the publishing industry really sort of move, I think, kind of the right direction, I would say. But I'd love to hear your. I mean, do you feel like we're going to a place where good, yes, awesome, books, or people just not reading?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think you're right. What you said is true. I think what you said is true. That there's a lot more opportunity for getting published now, especially with online submissions. It's easier. There used to be a lot of journals that were
easier to submit, not necessarily easier to get.
Yes, it's easier to submit, more accessible, for people to do it. And then just, like you said, a lot more diversity as far as the kind of fiction that's being published and the kind of poetry that's being published. There's so many more journals that are niche, right? Like Fairy Tale, Review, just all these different journals. So I think that's all good. Probably on the money side of things, it's really bad. As far as people getting paid, but it was probably not that good. It wasn't that good 15 years ago.
Who was making millions?
So
if you were Stephen King, who was making millions?
Yeah, so really, I think it's. I think that's.
One of the things I was going to add is also because these journals have largely moved online. Do you remember when we were in grad school? It was mostly these print journals, and the only people who read print journals were the family members of the people who got published in the print journals. No one bought print literary journals. But now people will go, "Oh, I really like this story. Let me send this link to somebody really quickly," and then all of a sudden there's a lot of eyeballs that get onto stories that Like when I was first publishing, I used to think, I hope it's like print journals because that's like the more serious stuff. And then after a while, I was like, I don't even send a print journal anymore because I just want as many people to see my stuff as possible. So I think that's also a really cool kind of like shift. And so for two people who kind of like weren't around when that was the case, what do you see sort of like the industry that your art is looking like right now? Hopeful, optimistic.
Sure. I personally am an optimist,
Great.
so I choose to hope that it's going in a positive direction. But things are definitely changing. I feel like, at least the way that I see it, like I mentioned, like collaborative play development, a lot of experimental theater is happening, and a lot of that is because film is like such a big thing. There's not really much things that theater can do that film can't, aside from the connection that is happening between the performers and the audience in the time that the production is happening. So a lot of it is getting into like post-dramatic theater, which has no fixed dramatic structure or like story structure. The U of A right now is doing Love and Information by Carol Churchill, which dramaturgy for. So yeah, it's very much like no fixed story. It's not illogical, but it's a disjointed logic within the show in order to replicate how disjointed life can feel. And it's specifically curating an experience, a singular experience between the audience and the performer in real time as it is happening.
Yeah.
They're not pretending to be these characters living through this journey. They are actors putting on a show for the audience, and they are existing within that time and space together, within the liminal space that is a theater. So that's kind of what I'm seeing is happening within a lot of young theater makers. And I mean, this has been happening for years. I mean, there's the Worcester Group in New York City, which is where like Willem Dafoe started being like professional within New York. He is one of the founders of the Worcester Group. There's Tectonic Play Project, which Greg Perotti, who's a professor here, was also part of within the New York theater scene. They did the Laramie Project, if anyone's familiar.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not necessarily a new thing, but it is definitely gaining a lot more traction because it is something that film can't do.
And I'll also just sort of like add on to that I mean, I say this, I think, to my, I teach a film adaptation class for the Honors College, and I say to them often that it's the freedom of constraints, right? Like, actually, sometimes it's because theater can't do those things that you have a lot more creative freedom to go, okay, well, let's try to like solve that problem creatively instead of like, using CGI and like, like having the ability to like create whatever you want. You go like, all we have is like a blank set and some people and like a limited budget. So how do we make sure that whatever we want to tell like is interesting without all the bells and whistles?
Exactly, and like Meow Wolf, if anybody is familiar with like Omega Mart, that is technically theater because it is like they are putting on a production for you to experience. It's immersive theater, it's not like traditional, but it is theater. And so like these things, these forms of theater, these experimental projects are making money.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of making sure that it consistently makes money.
Great, awesome. And then what do you want to round us out before we get to audience questions?
Sure. I have a bit less, not to put it on a downer, I have a bit less, not just hopeful, like kind of view of it, of how it could go. Because it's allowed for a lot of good things to happen and also for a vast sum of stuff to hit the internet that you may not be able to all sort through, Of course, if you have a thing and it's for a specific niche audience, I guarantee you that there is a website or a forum or a Reddit or whatever that has your exact specific niche, and like that could get you an immediate audience for your thing, especially if it like has some like worth behind it. And additionally, like if you're just going more general, if you're hoping to like hit a general audience with your piece and for it to be a success, that's gonna be hard nowadays without like specific backers. Just because with so much stuff constantly flowing through, unless there's a specific group with a specific dedicated view on what you're doing, then you're just gonna kind of hit a wall of 100 other things trying to do it at the same time. And what gives me mostly hope is that I've found people kind of thriving in those niches, you know, writing about like hyper-specific parts of a genre that they particularly like, or like fandoms or whatever that like all have their own kind of area that they can get an audience that people can start following them, and then expand out into their own like individual personal projects that they can work from. They're more like passion things that they just love themselves, and so I think that that's what gives me hope. But I think the internet it's like anything, just kind of a tool, and you've got to learn to wield it correctly.
Yeah, I mean, like, how do you make yourself stand out in that role? I mean, you and I talked about streaming services and the way that, like, that a lot of content that just, like, it's just everything is being greenlit now because there's so many things to find. And how do you break through? Yeah.
Did you ever watch those, like, 10-minute, like, short movie streaming things?
Which what?
No one did. No one watched those, but there was 100 of them. So
yeah.
Oh, the like vertical.
Yeah, like
ones?
the little vertical like TV shows that like came out.
Oh
from,
yeah,
like,
nobody watches.
no one watches those, but there was like 100 that all came out at the same time.
Oh
and
yeah.
it was just like shooting
and they're
like
all
a
the
shotgun.
same thing.
Yeah.
They existed. They were there. Okay, great. So let's move to some audience questions. I will say before we get to audience questions, but you can start to raise your hands now so that I can make sure that I call on you. I've never done one of these while drinking a beer. I feel like I should just do that for all of them. This is great. This is the most fun I've ever had hosting one of these.
Switch that next time with vodka.
Yeah.
I mean, really. Okay. So who's got some questions for us? Yeah, great.
Yeah. Thank you. Do you ever get concerned about athletics drowning out the attention economy? Like the attention, it seems like so much of our valuable attention is, it's almost like the stars being drowned out by the city lights. It's hard to see the faint stars. So how do you identify? Like,
So can I ask, do you mean specifically at a university, or do you mean just like in the professional field?
I mean, NIL, name, image, and likeness, now for athletes.
Sure.
I work in like wearable devices, and like the data that the athletes are generating is a huge moneymaker. There's athletic finance, athletic psychology, there's athletic nutrition, and it's like the mathletes, the drama kids, like everyone, it feels like the attention is being completely drowned out.
Yeah.
You ever get concerned by that?
Yeah. Let's. I mean, I know my answer, but let's have that.
I mean, only somewhat, because, like I said, with, like, just I'm, at least for me, I'm not a comp sci major, I'm not in that kind of area, but I have a lot of friends who are, and just the vast quantities of data that go into every individual thing seem so vast that to me, when I look at it, I'm like, oh, creative writing must take up half the internet, when that's not even fucking close.
Right.
And I think that, like, at least for me, because of the nature of like your interests and where you'll find it, if a person has a thing that they like, whether that's like athletics versus like a creative pursuit, they will find a space for it if they have like the dedicated attention to it. Because like most of my friends, despite the prevalence of like athletics and sports betting and everything nowadays, have never touched it in class, just because they are not particularly interested in the subject and they never had that come around to them. So.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, like, I understand that it does feel like the attention that athletics is getting, especially from the school's budget, very much so drowns out the arts.
At the UA?
At the
Just a little.
No, of course not. But yeah, so, like, especially, like, budget-wise, I feel like within the theater program specifically, it can kind of feel like there's competition within arts and athletics, but at the end of the day, that's not the students' fault. Like, their program is getting more funding. Yes, do I think it's a little bit bullshit? Maybe. But, like, it's what's happening, and I feel like as long as we can try and find a way to, hey, keyword collaborate, and like try to find a way to like make sure that all of these programs can collaborate with each other, then it kind of creates a little bit more equitable of a foundation. But yes, I do absolutely, like, I understand, like, athletics feels so overwhelming, especially within the university.
Yeah, I mean, what I was gonna say is I get concerned about it, but the one thing I am hopeful about is that it's not a new concern that I or probably anyone has. I mean, it's just the age-old nerds versus jocks thing, right? Like it's. I mean, I you know, it's the same way that when I was in high school, like there were like 3 people going to every poetry club meeting, and everyone was going to like the homecoming game, right? Like it's that always sort of seemed like it was the issue, and you know, the arts has the optimistic thing is the arts have always been able to persist throughout all of that. But I mean, yeah, Kindle, do you?
I mean, I definitely have students that are just this is like kind of just a specific situation I've had student athletes, and you know, on the football team, I had this student on the basketball team, and I mean they always prioritize the sports over academics, and I'm like, makes sense. I mean, it's just sort of the reality of their situation.
I think from a pedagogical level, I think that we do just in general maybe need to put a little more effort into cross-referencing those two things.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't there more Troy Boltons in the world? Like, why aren't there more of these athletes? That's a one for my wife. Like, why aren't there more like athletes who are in these creative writing programs and vice versa? Like, I don't know why those two things need to be at odds with each other necessarily.
I agree.
Like, I think that we do need to do more to try to encourage some cross-referencing.
Yeah, I think absolutely, like, it is valid to be concerned about it. I think the best way to combat that concern is by cross-referencing and making sure that, like, people and athletes especially are getting a well-rounded education. People in the arts are getting a well-rounded education, which, while the U of A is not necessarily notorious for that, we can definitely, like, do our part to try and make sure that we are getting well-rounded educations, like, taking charge of our educational experience. I definitely have been trying to do that in my years here. And like creating opportunities where there are none to connect with people that we wouldn't necessarily always connect with.
And not to like focus on it too hard, but me and you, Ted, we've talked before about how, at least as far as funding goes between education and athletics, like how it's not necessarily malice or like preference, how it's just that like arts are a lot more unwieldy to kind of handle for like admin, because if they're focusing on what makes us money and what is going to make the students money, then the arts are just kind of like a what do we do with this guy?
Yeah, just you know, but again, we've still persisted throughout all those years without having, you know, a whole lot of funding.
Yeah.
Other questions that we have from the audience? Yeah, great.
Hi. Should I get a mic?
Yeah, great.
Oh,
See that mic.
Yeah.
Wise Kenny.
I like to think. Whoa! Hi. I like to think I can project, but this is very useful. So I've seen a lot of discourse about the arts being a more gate-kept community. Like it's a bit more difficult to really find your niche, whatever, and like get involved to have the skill needed to get recognized in that. So I'm wondering, like, how do we view AI in the lens of like a tool for accessibility? Is that any kind of merit for generative AI? I have my opinion, but I want to hear what everyone else has to say.
I love the question. Yeah, yeah. What do we think?
And maybe this is just a bias on my part, relatively. At least as far as like, of course there is all the complications of being gate kept out of art because of various reasons. Like, A, it's just hard for writing, like to know where to get published and all that kind of stuff, and know how to do it professionally, and I think that's a good investment for you. But as far as like skill level, I have always found the idea that like generative AI helps like cross that gap to be a bit inane, kind of, like, just because, let's say like the concept is like, oh well, even the easiest version, like it helps me generate ideas. I mean, at least for me, like, you've got an imagination that's like 9/10 of it. You gotta like be thinking about it at least somewhat. Of course, all of it's a skill. It's something to like learn over time, and it's not going to be something that like is natural to necessarily like your situation. I don't think anyone's born with it. I think it's all like situational, how much you practice. Because the kid who's been writing kind of terrible fan fictions on AO3 for like 10 years is gonna have a like higher capability at writing than someone that's like just starting at college. But both of them can be great writers in my opinion, and I don't think generative AI is necessarily like helps a handicap there in any way.
what's the Ratatouille line? Anyone can be a
Anyone can be a
get a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a thought and then it vanished.
Sorry, it was the Ratatouille that really fell through.
Yeah, it's really just Remy gets to me. But I'll just kind of talk until I find it. But I feel like theater in general, especially on the performing side, can be very like gatekept, especially when it comes to like looks, stereotypes, typecasting, all of that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, I feel like a lot of theater kids or theater people, theater makers who are gatekeeping their communities and their projects are people that are just kind of a little bit insecure in their own ability to do things and their own ability to collaborate and like build those connections. And so I think a lot of the time, like, especially with my experience in theater, asking people and like reaching out for help, even though it is so incredibly scary, like trust me, like eventually you will find someone who is like, I see that you are trying to learn and I want to help you. I honestly think a lot of the time you will get more judged if you're using generative AI in order to build your skill rather than utilizing the community that is around you, even if it does feel intimidating to join.
I want to like tweak this question slightly as we move to you, Kendall, which is just because I remember when Kickstarter first came out, and I remember Zach Braff made his like horrible pitch for his horrible movie, and he ended up like just making all that money. He was like, oh, the people in Hollywood won't let me make this movie, and that's a problem, and you, the fans, can help me do it. Because he wanted to get through those gatekeepers, right? Like you know, like a professional must do that. And I was like, hey, like you're Zach Braff, like you can get through the gatekeepers, like you're behind the gate already, like you're okay. And B, the reason why you can't get moving because it sucks, it's not good. But I also was like, yeah, but like Kickstarter as an idea for like up and coming artists who, yeah, they probably have maybe sort of off, kind of offbeat, interesting things to do, like. This might be a way for them to be able to get their stuff made. So I'm interested in, Kendall, like the changes you've seen through the years of that industry, like the eradication of a lot of those gatekeepers, and yeah, if you want to bring it back to AI as well. But like, what do you think about in terms of like quality control? Like, this is the question.
As far as gatekeeping.
And do your best to not sound like a snob.
Okay, this is tough. I will say, I think. Since you asked earlier about my experience since I started teaching and now,
yeah.
I do actually think there's less gatekeeping in the classroom in general, just in general. Sure. Just like by it from other students, there's a lot more open-mindedness in the classroom than there was when I first started teaching, as far as like genre and lots of different things. I think people are more open to trying to understand what other people want to do and then trying to help them get there. And as my students, as well as and professors too. So I think that's good. That's the change I've seen that's positive. As far as, I don't know. I mean, I think it always comes down to like, it's not, every piece of art isn't going to be for everyone, but like, is it entertaining? Does it grab us? Does it pull us in? Whatever it is. And I think that's always like going to be the goal. So I guess gatekeeping in that regard, I'm okay with. Like, I think if something's not grabbing the audience, that we can't follow along, we're not interested. Like, that's a good thing that creative writing workshops can like sort of ferret out. Yeah. So I don't have a problem with some gatekeeping. And then with AI, I think I really agree with what you said about how like a writer or a playwright, whatever, would get more judged from using it. Like, which I've seen in my classroom. Again, like when a story gets turned in that is seemingly AI, there's a lot of judgment from the other students, like that you can feel, So yeah. So I think we would gatekeep the use of AI too. Like students will start to gatekeep and be like, no, we don't want that.
Yeah, while creating a safe community in the classroom. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I think we have time for one more audience question. Anybody else have a question they want to throw at us? Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to younger children, I'd say like maybe students in middle school right now, with the introduction of social media, and just like technology, the way that our world is currently being shaped up, AI, all of it. Do you think that you could see our creativity as a culture potentially diminishing in a way, or like almost going down, where students aren't, because they're using their phones so often, they're not finding these creative outlets to then pursue as something that they actually enjoy?
So just because you didn't have a mic, I'm just going to repeat the question real quick for the camera.
Okay.
It's a great question. So for the Gen Alpha, basically, for the upcoming generation, do we feel like there might be a sort of like dip in creativity because they're able to use AI to do that generative stuff, and they won't be able to sort of flex those creative muscles in that same way? Yeah, go ahead. Who's got it?
I can start just because I have a 12-year-old.
Oh yeah,
so maybe
oh yeah, you're definitely the person. Yeah.
But I mean, my daughter she's very into creativity and she's very creative. But and none of her
That's
teachers
why.
are here, so I can say this, without any of them knowing. But I've definitely seen slideshows she's made where I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's you use AI for this, and I'll tell her that, I'll say that, and she'll be like, no, I didn't, and like, but there'll be like words or terms or things that I'm certain no way she knew, right? So I mean, I definitely worry about it, for sure. I think like she's being exposed to like a lot of art that's like all the same, right? Like the same kind of videos, like the same kind of music, the same kind of storytelling. Like it's all like sort of flattened out, becoming more flattened out. I think a lot of what she's seeing and being exposed to, and it's like all the same stuff her friends listen to and her friends watch, which I guess like was true in our generation a little bit too, because there was less media, there was like less music and less movies, so like a lot of people did listen to the same stuff and like watch the same stuff. But I've seen that in her generation. They're all like, I wouldn't say they are like, it's not like a cornucopia of stuff they're like looking at online. It's like the same.
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say, so it's funny you kind of compared it. Like I was listening to a sociologist on a podcast the other day, who was talking about how a lot of people were concerned when obviously we were sort of addicted to TV and to video games throughout past generations. But he sort of made the point that at least in those there were narratives, right? Like, yeah, you were watching Bewitched in the 60s, and that was kind of like lame and dumb. But at least there was a sort of like a moral lesson that came at the end of it. Like you understood the characters, you got to know them. So I feel like I'm less sort of concerned about AI as I am concerned about the what do you guys call it? Like brain rot, right? Just like the sort of like what the fuck does 6'7" mean? It's just meaningless bullshit. And like the fact that is what that generation is largely sort of exposed to and getting sort of saturated in. That's my biggest concern. Maybe I'm a sort of like cockeyed optimist. I feel like I do think that like creativity is always going to be able to sort of like survive and win. But I'm more concerned about that than I am about the use of AI. That they're just being exposed to stuff that it just feels very Brave New World-ish. That like that they're just sort of amusing themselves to death. But yeah, what were you doing?
Yes. I will say it takes a lot of creativity and mental leaps and bounds in order to think that 6'7" is funny. So I do think they have some creative thinking there.
Wow, that is a silver lining.
I will say there is like a term in TV now called like second screen TV, where production studios are sending out like a memo to writers and directors of TV shows to keep in mind that people will be on their phones while they're watching. So to dumb down the storyline in order to make it easier to follow while you're on your phone.
What?
So I do think that like the industry specifically for entertainment is kind of catering towards this idea of dumbing down creativity and hindering the limits of creativity
and
within
attention spans
within the industry. And so I don't think necessarily that if Gen Alpha is losing creativity, I don't think it's for a lack of wanting. I think it's for a lack of encouragement and accessibility.
I generally agree, and like, well, I am worried. I have like my own anxiety about it, of course, but like, as someone that like just has a niece, like I believe in the indomitable power of the human spirit to create. Like, I have seen at least the feeling that like, how to put it? I have the feeling that the more things change, the more things will stay the same. And like, at least for like my niece, her parents are really like focused on making sure that she doesn't have access to a phone constantly. And that's something I've heard from like a lot of parents as things have changed. And I also just think that as much as like short form content is the method that like is going down right now, I have some faith that eventually it will be seen as kind of hokey and old and boring by whoever is the next person older. And I think that the stories we tell or create or the things we draw or anything will outpower it whenever someone sees it, and that drive to like create something meaningful will be there no matter what. So I think it's more down to like schooling and education to like really fill in that gap more so than just like, well, the TikTok I'm watching really made me think about narrative design. Am I right?
Yeah. I love that, and I think that maybe the note of hope that I'll end on also is, I mean, to your point about the sort of eclectic students, I haven't seen a dip in quality at all in my students' work. We just had our first round of stories last week, and like they were like all three were bangers. Like they were just great. Like it was just like holy shit. I don't even know what feedback to give on these things except to say just keep on like they were great. They were just fantastic. So there is no dip in quality, I think, in at least the generation that we're seeing now. So good on you, next generation. Keep it up. That said, I think it's probably about time for us to wrap it up. Just a few things before we do so. Our next and final Discourse Series event is on, I want to say December 5th, sounds right? Is that right? 2nd? December 2nd. Thank you very much, Peyton. December 2nd, and it's going to be on the future of higher education itself. So come on out for that. We are still figuring out where it's going to be. It's probably going to be on the mall because I think it'll be very nice out by then for us to be able to be out. So please come out to that. Follow us on all of our social media to find out exactly where it's going to be at UA Discourse Series on Instagram. And one last big, gigantic round of applause, not only for our panelists, but for Espresso Art Cafe, the absolute greatest place in Tucson to go. Make sure you all buy a whole lot of shit after this. Leave gigantic tips. You guys have been great. Thank you. You've been a great audience. Good night.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you.